As they say, jump for show, corner for dough. But what if you're a gluten-free introvert? Like ads for Hims or Keeps, I orient these videos towards a somewhat mature audience that already has some riding experience and sees value in continuing to grow. That said, even a total beginner can still take benefit from all this, so let's dive on into one of my favorite topics. Corners are jumps. Changed my mind. Every month I post a full-length riding tutorial only over to Patreon, but this one in particular was one of my favorites, and I thought it'd be really fun to share it all with you publicly here on YouTube. Before we get into the part about jumping out of turns, I'm realizing it makes sense to break down kind of my whole theory behind cornering. I orient these videos more to the Patreon audience that has already seen all my tutorials, and they kind of know how I think about riding. In short, I corner with two different techniques, carving and pumping. In order to really jump out of a corner, it relies more on that pumping technique. So let's break down the cornering types, and then we'll get into the fun part about jumping out of the corner. And it's worth mentioning, if you like this style of content, try popping over to my Patreon page and see if you'd want to help support the channel by watching more of those videos. All right, let's jump into the video. Pun fully intended. Carving. 1. In short, to carve a corner, the best line can be one of two types. Most commonly, a consistent line with no weird cuts or weaves or bobs. Or it could also be carving from high to low. I've mentioned the high-low line before, and it sets you up great for multiple options to exit the corner. Either way, you'll be setting your radius at the beginning of the corner, then committing to it for the full duration. This is the smoothest way to get through a turn. 2. Lay off the brakes, especially that front brake. I physically lift my index finger from the front brake lever to ensure I fully commit to no front brakes. It's often better to go too fast through a corner than it is to grab front brake. A handful of that front brake will wash out that front wheel entirely. If you're on a really steep trail, you can get away with a tiny bit of rear wheel tail braking. 3. Drop your outside foot and place the majority of your body weight on it. This will be your home base through the corner. Dropping that pedal allows for more lean, and it keeps you very low on the bike. 4. Lean the bike into the turn. With your weight on that outside dropped foot, the side knobs of your tire can really dig in if you lean that bike inward. The lower you are to the bike, the more you can lean. Personally, I really enjoy leaning a lot and don't have a rule of thumb for how much to lean. Instead, I almost always try to lean as much as I can, letting the grip of the trail dictate the lean angle. The more you lean, the more load you can put into the bike. The more load that's on the bike, the more you can spring out of the corner at the exit. And to be frank, the more you lean, the more fun you'll have. Enjoy it. 5. To exit the carve, you can either pull back into an upright posture and carry on, or sometimes you'll be surprised by a random obstacle and might need to add a little cutty to snake around something. Perhaps you'll feel like pulling up and adding a little jump out of the turn. Ideally, time to find a bonus backside and pump, or maybe you'll want to pull back on the bars and manual out of the corner. The world, or should I say the trail, becomes your oyster when you're one with the carve. Pumping. Depending on conditions, turn radius, and energy levels, you can pump the bike quite hard through a corner. I started doing this technique while racing dual slalom, as a big pump and downforce loads the tires enough to provide a bit more traction for those slippery surfaces. Combined with that slight high-low line choice, a good pump in a corner can generate a ton of speed. 1. Be sure you've got appropriate entry speed. You'll be exiting with even more speed than that, so if you're doubtful about the speed in the first place, the pump will not be the technique for that corner. 2. Load the front wheel as you set into the arc of the corner, at about the first 1/3 mark of the turn. Pushing the fork into the arc, this begins the pump motion. You'll also be higher up on the bike when initiating the pump than you would be when carving. Carving almost always has you lower to the bike than the pump does. 3. As you reach the halfway point through the corner, begin to pull back on the bars and begin pushing down into the pedals with your leg. Notice that when pumping corners, I'm not as leaned over, nor do I have my outside foot as dropped as I do when carving. 4. At about the 2/3 point, your legs should be fully extended as they'll be. Not fully straight, but pretty darn close to it. The pump uses a rocking motion from forward to rearward, and it basically takes place over the duration of the corner. 5. If you'd like to jump out of the corner, this is where a slight bunny hop motion will take you soaring into the air. The pump is by far the best technique to use if you do need to get some air time out of a turn. It's getting to be summertime, finally, here in the Pacific Northwest, which is a lot of fun. The sun, when it comes out up here, we're pretty far north, and the sun really comes out. When you're on longer rides, you can end up getting kind of lightheaded, you can end up with some muscle cramping, you can get extra tired earlier than you might expect, and a lot of those are telltale signs of dehydration. Well, even if you drink a ton of water, you can still get dehydrated pretty quick, especially in the summer, because you're also sweating out all those precious electrolytes. I've been lucky enough to partner with the fine folk over at Element, that's spelled LMNT, and they make a really simple electrolyte supplement. It's just sodium, potassium, magnesium, the 3 main ingredients. And there's a tiny bit of stevia and flavoring to make these even more yummy. They're really good. And I found that with one of these in my water bottle, plus a full hydration pack, I can go a good 3 or 4 hours on our hottest days up here in the Northwest. For a limited time now, anything you purchase from the link in the description below, it's drinkelement.com/Jeff. That's DRINK, LMNT.com/JEFF. Any purchase from that link will earn you a free sample pack so you can try a few more extra yummy flavors. Today we're drinking raspberry salt and it's one of my favorites. Big thanks to all of you for trying this stuff, for your feedback in the comments down below, and thanks to Element for sponsoring this video. Stay salty, everyone. That's a good one. So corners are really jumps. Change my mind. Let's break it down a little bit more. While my favorite topic here on Patreon is how to essentially trivialize your entire trail riding experience to be just a simple lap at the local pump track, my other favorite topic is how to corner. This tutorial combines both. The reason we're discussing how your cornering nemesis is the same as your jumping mentor is because the mental strategy of this will get you doing multiple things better, or at least attempting so. Since learning is simply realizing, I'll have done my job if this sticks in your mind for your next ride. Like a government contractor, once my job is done, you'll need to find another solution for the whole landing part. Hint, that's about 6 posts prior to this. The most raw fundamental of how to properly jump a bicycle parallels that of other industries, and that's to go up, you must first go down. Jumping out of corners becomes an amazing opportunity to reposition your bike for whatever is coming next. With some precision, you can then find another obstacle to pump, or skip over something that would otherwise stop you in your tracks. But at the most basic level, even if it's not mandatory, it'll force you to pump that turn and exit faster than you came in. For most of us, that's going to be a huge win. Converting downforce into upward trajectory is an extremely fundamental skill that is very worth your while to practice. Adding any sort of ramp to the equation, and it'll not just garner you a million views on YouTube, but significantly further your graceful entry into the atmosphere. If you think about it in the most basic sense, corners are basically ramps, just on their sides. Both have arcs, both are misunderstood, and just like teenagers, they can go in a lot of different directions. Let's add the pump and prepare for liftoff. Pumping a bicycle happens when you're adding downforce via your arms and legs, and when done at any point on the trail that has a transition. This results in an increase in your forward momentum. To corner correctly, you need to balance your front to rear weight distribution with your timing. If your weight can go from front wheel to rear wheel, that is essentially the same thing as pumping. When you forced your bike into that tight cornering arc, it begins to store kinetic energy just like when it's rolling up a ramp. This technique will work better on some turns than others. You can do this on berm turns, you can do this on flat turns. Berms often include a small kicker at the end, sometimes referred to as a shark fin, and if done excessively, as a sharknado. New school trail builders absolutely love this technique, so be ready for it. At the root of jumping out of a corner, you need enough traction to be able to really load the bike, allowing it to bark up to the sky. You also need enough angle in that turn to really store up that kinetic energy. Breaking it down, as you first enter the corner, you'll need to weight the front wheel as you set and commit to your cornering arc. By about the 1/4 to 1/2 point of the turn, you need to pull back and transfer your weight to the rear wheel, usually via that outside leg. Hold that position for a moment. At around the 3/4 mark, the arc of the turn will have placed its maximum load upon the bike's suspension, especially the rear suspension. As the bike starts to rebound from 3/4 to exit of the turn, go with it. Unweight your feet while continuing to pull the handlebars back and up. This will allow your bike to become airborne. The expression of unweighting your feet basically means a tiny hop upward to separate yourself from the bike. You don't actually want separated, but just like a good guidance counselor, you don't want to restrict your underling. You want the bike to fly. You will need to reposition the bike slightly while airborne for the most ideal landing position, so it's vital to keep your eyes looking far ahead. It's not important to go high with this technique, it's simply important to get some air. Literally, any amount of air will do. You've got multiple key tools at your disposal to adjust this technique. Line choice can be altered to help accommodate this. My least favorite line of low to high makes a jumping exit fairly impractical, but a consistent line of mid to mid is usually ideal on a good turn. If you need to adjust, you can always enter high and cut low to create a tighter arc, which provides more kinetic energy for more of a lift. Next up, how and when you preload the bike can also change the jump. And finally, another valid technique is to simply attempt to manual out of a turn. There are some simple drills you can practice at home. Regular cornering and pumping through corners will help, but you can specifically add in some exaggerated jumps. Try to compress your bike through a cone course, and as it rebounds, go with it, and set a goal of a little bit of airtime. Thank you all for joining me. If you enjoyed this format, pop over to my Patreon page where I've got about 50 other videos in a similar format, all about riding tutorials. We've got stuff like how to drop, how to manual, how to lannual, how to boost jumps, teaching Riley how to boost jumps, how to get low and pro, how we can teach Riley to get low and pro, a whole bunch of fun videos over there. And the support I get from Patreon is a big part of how we make this whole public YouTube thing happen. So thanks to everyone. Thanks to Riley for filming and editing. Logan also helped with some of the filming. And thanks to Element for their support. All right, I'll see you guys in the comments and on the comments over at Patreon. Peace and wheelies, everyone.